Have you ever wondered who really benefits from all the code and projects that are available as open source? Did you ever think what are the differences between hobbyists and enthusiasts that contribute to the open source project and big corporations that can afford to pay developers and programmers to create and maintain open source projects? And what about the power dynamics in the open source community? Are the core maintainers and project owners like the bourgeoisie who hold most of the power and take the important decisions? And what about the rest of us? Are we the working class who make the hard work but are not allowed to take part in these important decisions? Get ready for some Marxism because in this episode of Call of Culture, we will answer these questions and we will explore the social classes in the open source. In this episode, we will get a bit Marxist and we will talk about social classes in the open source community. But what is a social class? According to Marxist theory, social classes are defined by their relationship to the means of production. In other words, if you own the tools and resources needed to produce goods, you belong to the ruling class, while those who don't are part of the working class. However, Max Weber's perspective on social classes differs from Marx's view. While Marx saw social classes as group of people with different kind of properties of the means of production, Weber emphasized the importance of status and power in defining social classes. In Weber's view, social classes are not only defined by economic factors, by a combination of economic, cultural, and political factors. This means that two people who have similar levels of income may not necessarily belong to the same social class if they have different levels of prestige, education, or political power. But how can we use these ideas of production means, power, and status to open source projects? An open source project can be seen as a society where every member has more or less equal access to the means of production, which in this case is the project itself. In this society, the outcome that members receive is not material wealth, but a form of status within the community. Using Max Weber's idea of social class as a group of people in the same kind of relation regarding the production means, we can identify four main social classes in our open source project: project owners, maintainers, contributors, and users. Project owners are like the bourgeoisie in Weber's theory. They are the ones who started the project and own the means of production, in this case the code base, and the project's infrastructure. They have most of power and control over the project's direction and decision making. One step below, we have the maintainers. They are like the skilled workers in Weber's theory. They are responsible for maintaining the code base, reviewing the contribution, and making sure everything is working smoothly. They have a lot of power and influence in the project, but not as much as the project owners. Contributors are like the unskilled workers in Weber's theory. They contribute code or other resources to the project, like translations or images, design, etc., but do not have as much influence or decision-making power as maintainers or project owners. Finally, users are like the consumers in Weber's theory. They use project software or benefits from its output, but do not contribute directly to the production of the project. I added also another external social class over the owner of the project that would be the owner of the platform. In most of the cases, GitHub. Why is this important? Because GitHub, as a platform, has a higher power and control over the project than the owner itself. Can even revoke the power of the project from the owner if it is vandalized or does not comply with the code of use of the platform. By understanding these social classes, we can better understand the power dynamics and hierarchies that play within open source project. But as you can guess, it's not that simple. Here are two messages from the library log4j that caused the worldwide internet havoc in late 2021. The security bug of the library was that spread that almost all the internet was affected. In these messages, the creator of the library and one of the core maintainers claim that they are maintaining it in their after work time and they are not being paid for it at all. So maybe we need another dimension to see what's happening here. In this new perspective, the open source ecosystem can be seen as a capitalist market, where programmers use their time as a production mean to create projects. Based on this, we can identify three new different social classes: professionals, hobbyists, and slaves. Professionals are programmers hired by companies to maintain and create open source projects. They are paid for their work and can make a living out of it. Hobbyists are people like university teachers, research centers, or students whose work is partially related to the open source, but not totally. However, they can spend some working time on them. They might earn some income from their work on open source project, but it is not their primary source of income. Finally, slaves are people who do not earn money in the open source project, even if they contribute or maintain projects. They have another job outside of the open source world, and their work on open source project is voluntary. They may receive some recognition or status for their contributions, but they do not receive any financial compensation. How these new classes relate to the ones that we saw before? Well, they are orthogonal. We can create a table and see how in some projects someone can be the owner but works for free, being an slave class, while other people can be professionals working from companies, making punctual contributions to the project. In this episode of Code of Counter, we explore the idea of social classes in the open source world through a Marxist lens. By exploring the production means and the outcome of various roles in open source projects, we uncover the power dynamics that often are overlooked. By applying Marx's concept, we gain a better understanding of the power structure and inequalities that exist within the open source communities. It is clear that the capitalist market approach to the open source development can result in exploitation of individuals who are not compensated for their time and effort. As we move forward in the open source world, it is important to continue questioning and challenging this power dynamic and work towards creating a more equal and just community. The Marxist perspective offers us a valuable tool in understanding the social structure of open source and pushing for a greater equity and inclusion.